Hello everyone and welcome to Content Management Through Mobile Devices. My name is Sarah O'Keefe. I'm hosting today with our guest presenter, Bill Gamboa. A couple of quick things before we get started. The usual. We are recording this event, so if you would like to go back and listen to the recording after the fact, we will send you a link within typically about 24 hours of the event. If you're interested in other events that we're doing, you can find those on our events page, which is scriptorium.com/events. And I would definitely encourage you to take a look at that. We have lots of really interesting stuff coming up, other interesting stuff coming up. And the third and maybe most important thing is if you do have any questions as we're going along, please take a moment right now to locate the questions area in GoToWebinar. You can type your questions in there, and we will take those at the end when Bill gets through the initial presentation. And with that, we are ready to go. I wanted to introduce Bill. I've known Bill for an embarrassingly long number of years, but he has been doing XML work pretty much since XML came along, has 25 years in publishing, and so is really somebody who knows an awful lot, not just about specific tools, but about the issues that he's dealing with and just the big picture issues of what's going on in our field. Currently, he is Director of Sales Engineering at Astoria/Transperfect. And Bill, are you on the line there?
Yes, I am, Sarah.
There you are. Excellent. Well, I can hear you, so take it away, please.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that introduction, Sarah, and welcome everybody to this presentation. And just want to tell you a couple of things that I'm going to be showing you on this presentation as I start to get into it. So one of the things that I would hope that you would get out of this presentation is looking at the possibility of mobile devices with content management. As I go through this, I'd like for you to keep that in mind. I'll be looking at some problems facing authors and technologists and just describing that a little bit to you and how that relates to content management through mobile devices. Also, I have a couple of surveys, and you'll see the information in the surveys. I believe that you'll find it really interesting as to this type of information when I get to those surveys. Then we'll look at a use case. I think the use case is going to be really important in this presentation because it's going to tie everything together. And then at the end, I'm going to end up describing 4 mobile apps that apply specifically to content management processes. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to start off then with this quote from Paul Daugherty, who is the CTO at Accenture. And so in this quote, what Paul Daugherty is actually talking about is what is a primary driver that can make a positive difference in your product? Do you see any strategic growth in your company, or rather technologies that would affect the strategic growth in your company and also affect that bottom line? As far as mobile devices are concerned, I think we all know that the arrival of mobile devices in our jobs as well as our personal lives has really taken over quite an area. In other words, we're all using these mobile devices, but how do we really use them for not only the technology part with content management systems, but also on the business end? And I'm going to be talking a lot about that in this presentation. So what I want to show you is this mobile device movement, or called MDM, and how can it affect the business of developing, managing, publishing content in a positive way, and how can we leverage this technology to grow our business and boost our profitability. So a couple of questions. One of the purposes of this presentation then is to get you to start thinking about mobile device movement and how that's going to affect your business. So in this presentation, I'm not just going to be giving you a whole lot of information for you to digest or write down and then share with everybody. I really want you to start thinking about some of these processes or some of these different strategies that you can use within the content management arena. So maybe you're a tech doc manager and you want to understand this new technology and how it can help you. Or maybe you're an author and you need to use a content management system and you want some examples of how the mobile devices can help you in your job. I hope whatever your responsibilities are, that this presentation then is going to stimulate you to want to know more about mobile device technology as it applies to CMS. In the content management business then, we always want to deliver the most accurate and valuable information to the end user. And I'm sure those of you who have content management systems today and are fully involved in that perfectly understand what I'm talking about. But not only does this information play a vital part of our product, but from a business perspective, we always want to deliver the precise information, and that can be a differentiator between your product and your competitor's product. So as part of this presentation, I have a scenario that I hope will give you some insight into content management through mobile devices. So a content management mobile device strategy then can take on a lot of purposes, or maybe just a few. But whatever pertains to you, realize that the strategy should not be purely for technical reasons, but should also have a sound business purpose. And I'm hoping that you'll get that out of today's presentation. I think it's safe to say that technology is a part of every business now. It's a part of all we do, but we need to start working on taking advantage of the new trends within technology to really make the most out of them. So first of all, let's take a look at some problems that content authors and technologists would encounter. One problem then is with content authors. What are some of the problems that content authors actually face? And again, this relates to content management, so it's for editing content, managing content. Suppose then an author is getting feedback, and their feedback is from their audience that they don't fully understand what they're reading. Or what if they can't follow the procedural steps and because of the way it's written? Typically then, what an author will do is try to analyze why they're getting this negative feedback and analyze how they can fix the problem. One of the ways that maybe an author might look at fixing this problem would be to rewrite that content so it uses more precise language, or maybe use helper terms as it links links the reader to maybe a more elaborate description or definition. Also, what authors tend to do is put in terms or phrases that can reference other information or prompt the writer to search for additional information. Again, this helps the author from maybe becoming too verbose and having a lot of additional content in there. But what does this do to help the author connect with his or her audience? And will this help to foster that business-to-customer digital relationship? So along these lines then of what an author faces, think of it not only from a technology point of view, but think of it from a business point of view. How about technologists? How do they tackle the same issue as an author would have? For example, the content that those people in the audience are not seeing on their website, or maybe not quite fully understanding or seeing this clearly on the website. One of the areas that a technologist then deals with is the searching. So search has become a main concern to those who design websites. Producing those better search engines then that are going to work on mobile devices is part of the technology, but not part of the business solution. Will these technical strategies then support that digital relationship between that website and those consumers of content? And maybe it's for existing customers, or maybe it could be for new customers or prospective customers. So thinking along these lines then, fixing all of this or addressing these situations, is this really going to support the organization's bottom line profitability? So what are consumers saying? So I have a couple of surveys that I want to show you and describe to you. And as I mentioned before, I think that you'll be surprised at some of these numbers. Maybe you won't be. Maybe you've already seen surveys like this, but I certainly was when I first looked at these surveys. So this first survey is a mobile email survey, and I got it from emailmonday.com. And the first thing I want to point out to you then is notice the high percentage of users accessing their emails through mobile devices rather than logging into their computers and bringing up something like Gmail or Outlook. Email users then have already adapted mobile devices as a two-way communication between the businesses and themselves. So again, these are some of the areas that I want you to think about and look at. So this is a clear indication then that organizations are already involved in a business-to-customer digital communication. So it's no longer a question of how successful will a business-to-customer digital relationship be using these mobile devices. It's now a matter of understanding the value of integrating those mobile devices with your CMS to bring about that digital relationship. Here's another survey. This is a mobile usage survey. And you probably could guess then that a high percentage of mobile device users access news on their mobile device, maybe for getting those quick bits of news clips, or maybe for checking on your favorite sports teams. Or the other part that you see a high percentage that I have circled is for food and entertainment. And this could be anything such as restaurant location or menu of a restaurant, or maybe it's events that are coming to town and you want to find out where this event's going to be and when it's going to be. So those are common. Those would be what you would expect. But look at the last one, the third one that I have circled, product information. I found this a bit surprising that the same percentage that of users that are accessing that news and food and entertainment information are also accessing product information on their mobile devices. So what this is really saying is that consumers are abandoning the conventional methods of accessing information and embracing mobile devices. So a key insight then is looking at one of the problems of mobile computing, and that is looking at social networks or context-based services. And that has increased connections with organizations and their consumers. But what many organizations have lost in the process is an intimacy with their customer. So their customers can get all that information, but are they really being intimate with their customers in this mobile device connection with their customers? The reason is the connections have been viewed as just maybe another communication avenue or a transactional channel rather than an opportunity to improve relationships with their customers. So one area then I would like for you to think about as you're listening to me is that organizations really need to look at technologies that encourage and support a business-to-customer digital relationship, and certainly content management systems is one of those technologies. Here's another quote from Paul Doherty, and in it he is indicating that companies are overlooking the opportunity to use available technology to build a stronger relationship with their customer base. He also mentions that a new digital mindset is necessary for looking at new technologies or harnessing and working with new technologies. So what he's saying is that simply building new apps and using them to do business the same way is not the best approach to take advantage of applying that mobile strategy to your business. A key takeaway then from this would be some areas that you need to think about. So if you think about your content and the customers that consume that content, I have a couple of questions. What are some of the ways that you can communicate with your customers using mobile devices? So as you think about maybe if you have a content management system or you are putting one in place or you at least know what a content management system does, bringing in a mobile device or mobile apps that connect with that content management system, how can you communicate with your customers? How can a mobile device strategy help to improve communications? If you think about how a CMS manages a content development process, and then envision how this mobile app or mobile device can enhance that process. For example, suppose you think about content being accessed by an organization's customers, and they typically want product information. Or maybe they want to know about future features or new features. Through mobile devices then, customers can directly ask questions about that product. So you can set this up through mobile devices, and I actually at the end of this presentation will give you a little bit more information when I talk about specific apps. And then another example, customers can actually give feedback to maybe those content authors that they're having difficulty understanding a feature or understanding a description of a feature. Also the other way around, these customers or consumers of content through a mobile device can give positive feedback and say that they like the description or they like the instructions, they were well written, which means or tends to be that they will continue to use your product and talk more about your product. Another example is think of your content being delivered to information consumers on their mobile devices. Then think about collecting valuable consumer information back from that audience that is working on their mobile devices. This type of interaction then with your customers can improve your content naturally, and equally as important, it can help develop that relationship. So in other words, it's not just the technology that you need to think about, it's also the business that you need to think about, and how can you improve your business with this new type of technology using mobile devices with content management systems. So I have a use case, and I want to go through this use case with you and hopefully tie in all that I've talked to you about so far with this use case. The use case is about a company called Avantair, and Avantair is an airline company. It's in Clearwater, Florida, and as the slide indicates, it provides on-demand flights for their customers for both business and personal travel across North America, Mexico, Bahamas, and Caribbean. What they do is they fly a smaller aircraft that's very efficient, and because of its speed and fuel efficiency, they can offer premium services at a low cost. And they want to continue to do that and grow their business. But they identified a problem that was getting in their way of growing their business. And this problem was they needed to improve their data capture process in order to continue to offer these high-quality services at a premium, or rather at a really good low cost. So the situation then, in more detail, is one of their problems was that the pilots had to sift through pages of travel charts and checklists for every single flight, and this slowed down drastically their operational efficiency. So a lot of the communication then between the pilot and the operations center was by fax. So you can imagine a pilot leaving the aircraft to go and fax this information over to the operations center, and also by phone by calling up the operations center and submitting flight data and invoices. So this was taking a lot of time, and it was hampering their business, their overall operational efficiency. So Avantair wanted a more efficient way of information exchange from pilot to the operations center. So the pilot really could be thought of as that consumer of the content, whereas their operations center could be considered the organization that pushed out that information to them. They also wanted aircraft and flight data to be transmitted real time to the company's information system. So Avantair then started looking for a way to make its business communications and information exchange process more efficient. What they found was that they introduced tablet computers equipped with electronic forms so the pilot could use that before and after flights. So no longer did that pilot have to get out of this airplane, get out of their cockpit. They could just, after they stopped their flights or before they began their flights, they could bring up these electronic forms on their tablets. The tablets connected to the back-end system, which gives real-time transmission of flight data. The pilots can also submit client information to the operations system and have a real-time two-way communication, especially if any last-minute details need to be resolved. The pilots also received updated client information on their tablets while they were in the cockpit on the ground, and they didn't have to leave their planes anymore. And again, that was one of the areas that they were looking to be more efficient in. And this process then not only streamlined the necessary communications, but it also helped the in-office personnel work more efficiently with the real-time information. The advantage then was that the data captured by these electronic forms on these tablets was used immediately by the office staff for invoicing the clients, which means there's no lag time in the invoicing process. If there's any last-minute changes in their flights for their clients, the pilots or the in-office staff could be notified immediately. If the pilots needed to, they could immediately submit any client information back to the office staff while they're in the plane, so any last-minute changes. And then this two-way real-time mobile communication streamlined their business, and it also enhanced the quality of that data that was captured and had a really big effect on their bottom line. So then you could see by this that using these tablets, this mobile device, they were able to streamline their process, and it really affected their bottom line. And so here's a quote from their CIO, and you can see from this quote that the organization then realized this ROI by using a mobile strategy to collect that data and efficiently use it. What I found interesting about this use case was that they started out as an endeavor to improve a couple of their business processes, but the real ROI turned out to be a mobile strategy centered around a digital feedback loop between the content managers and the consumers of the content. So what's the value proposition? It's customer feedback through mobile device application. So let's take a look at a couple of areas of this. At Astoria then, what we're endeavoring to do is empowering our customers to talk to their customers. So we have looked at a mobile device strategy, and we have one in place now that is a way for our customers to improve their business-to-customer digital relationship. That intimacy that can be brought about by reaching out to customers directly off of that mobile device that they're always carrying around. Think of it this way. If you can improve your customer relationship by having a two-way conversation with them to answer their questions immediately, or to improve the quality of your product information that they read and use, then you can create a stronger customer relationship with your existing customers as well as your prospective ones. So in the next 4 slides, I want to go through some mobile app functions and describe them to you and give you some sense of some mobile apps that can work with a content management system. And these are apps that are being developed by Astoria Software. And again, we believe these apps are the types of apps that you would need for a content management mobile strategy. The first app then is what we call the Reader app. And this app could be used by a customer's end user to read documentation about new or improved features. So this can be a way to inform your customers of new benefits of the product. So it's not only viewing that technical documentation, but also getting information out to them. They'll be able to search for documentation with this app. You can allow them to rate the documentation and get that immediate feedback before you finalize it. So you can see there's a couple of things going on in here. It's not only the technical documentation that's maybe part of your product that you can get out to the end user, but it's also a way of interacting with them so that you can get their feedback. In other words, that, as I've mentioned a few times, that digital relationship, that round trip information out to consumers or customers and getting that back as a feedback, and having that, that touch point with your customers so that you have that intimate relationship. This can then be that method for developing, using this particular app for developing that feedback loop between the writers and content consumers. So this will work on a tablet, so you can get full view of the documents, and it's designed to work on iOS and Android tablets. Another app is the reviewer. The reviewer then will allow Astoria reviewers to review content before it goes to that next process. Typically, it's an approval process, or maybe it's a publishing, or maybe even a localization process. So this person who is the reviewer could receive email notifications on their smartphone or their tablet. Then they'll be able to interact with the content review process on that mobile device. They'll be able to provide comments, and when they complete a review, they'll be able to advance that content on to the next step in the workflow. The important part about this particular app is that this can really be looked at as eliminating any bottlenecks in a review process. Those bottlenecks can be anything such as maybe the reviewer is not in the office. Maybe they're traveling and they're in an airport or just getting into a hotel room or something like that. And what they need to do is review some content so that as the content is going through this life cycle process or this content development process, the reviewer actually at times can be that bottleneck, because that content needs to be reviewed, signed off on by that person before it can continue on to the next step. Well, within a app such as the reviewer app, that can eliminate those types of bottlenecks. And also, if other reviewers need to get involved, this app would allow that, and notifications can be sent to other reviewers, and they can be involved in either reviewing that same content or maybe in the review process as it goes through some other steps. So this app would be available on iOS and Android tablets and phones. The third app then is what we call the producer app. And this app, the target audience would be localization and publication coordinators. So within this app, then these people who have this responsibility would have the ability to select content and initiate a localization or publishing process. So maybe that content has been through the editing step, maybe it's been through the reviewing and the approval step, and now then it's ready to be sent off for some type of composition or out to localization, out to translation vendors or TMS. And through this particular app, then a person would be able to go ahead and work on that particular process by selecting that content and sending it off to that other step within the whole process. So they will be able to work on submitting jobs, such as maybe checking the status, making sure that that content is ready to go into a localization or publication step. They'll be able to update content if they needed to. And maybe that update could be just very simple updates to the content. And this will also be available on iOS and Android tablets. Excuse me for a minute while I just grab a drink of water here. My throat's getting a little rusty on me. Okay, I'm back. And the fourth app is what we call the Subject Matter Expert app, or the SME app. So the Astoria SME then with this app will be able to navigate the repository and perform certain content actions. For example, they're going to be able to check out, update, save, and check in content. So a subject matter expert then might have to modify some of the content. And of course it wouldn't be extensive modifications, but maybe they have the capability or the responsibility of adding additional information. So through this app they'd be able to do that. And also after they have finished with maybe that process, they'll be able to move the content to the next step in that workflow. This app will also have some of the same functions as the previous app, which is the Producer app. And that could be in case the SME is also an Astoria user that has some of these other responsibilities, such as the producer responsibility to move content into a publishing process or localization process. And then this app will also work on an iOS and Android tablet. So I hope that you found that those apps that Astoria is working on under development, one of them, the Reviewer app, is going to be coming out the door here very shortly. And that these apps are what we have identified as very critical apps for a content management system if you're going to have a mobile device strategy with your content management. And all of these areas that I've been talking to you about, the digital feedback loop, the customer intimacy processes, how do you stay in touch with your customers? These are the type of apps that you could use or that you will need to actually be able to do those processes within your content management system that will help build your organization and affect that bottom line. And I want to end up my presentation with this particular slide. And just as it says, a mobile strategy is no longer optional. And as I've been going through this presentation today, specifically when I showed you the different surveys, you saw the numbers and how they relate to using mobile devices within a content management system. So if you're thinking of moving your content management system into a mobile device strategy process, then you're going to need a solid mobile device strategy that successfully positions your company into a really solid area, empowers it to sell more effectively. At the same time, you can use these mobile apps to reinforce your brand. So at Astoria, we're excited about being the first CCMS vendor to embrace this mobile strategy, and we know that it's going to propel our customers forward into this arena. I'm now going to move into the question and answer period.
Okay.
And you can also, okay, you're welcome. I was just going to mention one last thing, that if you have some additional questions that we don't get to answer or you think about something later on, please take down my email address, as you can see, and feel free to send me your questions through an email. Thank you.
Okay, so I do have a couple of things. For those of you that are on the live call, go ahead and drop your questions into the questions area, and we will try to get to those. Bill, I wanted to ask you about localization and how that plays into all of this. What sort of what sort of impact do you see when you combine the complexities of mobile content strategy with localization requirements?
Okay, good question. What we see a lot of for localization requirements is that using a content management strategy, it actually manages that particular content as to when content is ready to be localized. So, for example, let's say that a book has already been translated into German, but now then there have been some updates to it, and it now needs to be sent out again to be localized or translated. And how does that actually work? Well, a content management system recognizes what needs to be translated, but and then it would pick up that content and send it out by whatever means. Whatever means could be, it could send it to an FTP site for the translation vendor, or it could send it directly to the TMS. But how does that work within a mobile device area? Well, I pointed out one of those apps that you could actually, the producer app, that you could actually use that for localization processes, meaning that a person maybe could get notified through a workflow process that there is some content that needs to be sent out to a localization process, and that person could actually be someone who can check on that, sure that it has been approved, it's been edited, it's been reviewed, and now then it's ready to move on out to be translated. And instead of that just sitting in a queue, someone that has a mobile device could actually look at that. They don't have to log into the system desktop or their laptop. They could just actually do that through their mobile device, like a tablet or a smartphone, and then process that by sending it off to that next step, which would be actually sending out to that localization.
Okay, thank you. The other thing, I wanted to ask you kind of a big picture question, which has to do with, I just wanted to ask you kind of the big picture question of, what's the biggest change that you've seen, over time? Because, you and I have been doing this for a while, and I think that, there's a degree of value in looking back over years and saying, this is really important, and this is why, or this is going to peter out. And I believe that because I saw it happen before with, with something else. What kind of perspective do you see, given your, broad experience, in terms of what's happening today and what the biggest differences are in the industry for us?
Okay, I actually see a couple of big areas. One big area is what we just talked about, or the question that you just had for me, and that is localization or translations. Years ago, content management systems actually were for managing that XML or that SGML content, and making sure that all the reuse was in place, that you didn't have your content scattered half in the content management system and half on your local directory system. So everything was all together. That's really the way that content management systems started out back then, back at the very beginning, and gave that really good way of keeping your hands on that content and watching what's going on, and making sure that if you had reuse, that it was effectively reused, and you could find out where things were reused, etc. But within the last, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 years, and it keeps getting more and more, is the business of localizing or translating content. And what I see is going on with that is that there are companies out there now who have been translating their content in 1 or 2 or maybe 3, but let's just say a handful of languages. And the reason for that is that they can't really go any further than that. In other words, they want to really translate their content into maybe 10, 15, or 20 languages, is that it's very burdensome for them when they don't have a content system. They have to do a lot of that manually. But when they do have a good content management system in place with localization part of it correctly configured, what happens is that a lot of that can be done manually, rather automatically. In the past it's done manually. So a lot of that can be done automatically. And that automation now then frees them up for looking for more business, rather translating their content into other languages, which brings about more business, and also frees them up for other areas. But I talked to a couple of companies, I'd say over the last few months, that was a real eye-opener for them, and they were very, very interested, and we're actually working with them now going forward, because that would help them out a lot. But one company was an SGML company, and they really had not looked at the new features of a CMS in several years. So this was an eye-opener for them and a really good way of taking it forward, going forward. So that's one of the areas that I would say has changed. Another area that has changed or that's coming up more and more that we see is that the integration with some of these other editors is very, very important. And now that these other XML editors have become more robust, they've become a much bigger player in the content management arena. So now there's several of them out there. I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to sound biased or anything, but I'm sure that you folks know who I'm talking about. But if you don't, all you have to do is look them up on their XML editors and you'll see the key players. And they have become a really big part of content management systems. Whereas before, in their infancy, content management was maybe picking one or two key players and just sticking with them. But now that there are some newer ones on the market, they've made it competitive for each other, and those editors have now become very robust. And when you integrate them with a content management system such as Astoria, you can get a really full-round content development process in place using those editors.
So basically people have more options than ever before.
They do have more options, but I guess the point that I was trying to make is that those editors definitely have become a whole lot more robust and can do a lot more than they have been doing in the past several years, mainly because of the competition with each other.
Okay, well, I think that'll wrap it up for us. I want to thank you for coming and giving us some things to think about going forward. And for those of you that are on the call, or for that matter, if you're listening to the recording, Bill's contact information is right there, and I'm sure you know where to find us at Scriptorium here. So, Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
And I will look forward to seeing you down the road at some conference, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, there's a few coming up, so I'm sure I'll see you, Sarah. Thank you.
We'll see you there. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye now.